late here today. We're doing a little paleo pancake action. Our favorite thing, as you know, quick recipe, 2 bananas, 4 eggs, 2 scoops of protein powder, a little dash of vanilla, blend it, and you pour it like a crepe. And it comes out super thin and sort of feels like you're eating pancakes, but you're not, and so you feel great. You're like, I'm gonna eat pancakes and be super skinny, which is the whole point of paleo pancakes. My kids like them, Leif likes them, so it's a win-win. And then if you have to eat off your children's plates, which is something that I do on a regular basis, they're not French fries, you know? So pretty good. We're having a serenade in the kitchen. The kids have a Christmas performance today, so we're trying to prepare. Okay, a couple things around the world that you should know about. Theresa May stays in her position. In Britain, she remains the Prime Minister. This is important because she's going back to the EU to negotiate terms of the divorce between the UK and the EU. So that's happening today. The terror suspect is still on the run in France, still at large. You should know that. And the third thing you should really know overseas is that there is a peace agreement, very tentative, between the two sides in Yemen's civil war. This is important because this is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world that no one talks about. And today in the Senate, there's going to be a vote about whether or not the U.S. is going to withdraw some support for the Saudis in this civil war. We're going to get into that a little bit later on the site, and I'll put a couple links so you guys can check that out, but just kind of know that that's happening. A couple stories stateside I think you should know about today, and I'm going to start with the one that I think has the most potential to impact our lives, but you probably won't hear about. Did you know in California they're trying to figure out if they can have a tax on texting? It would be like a surcharge on your bill. So maybe it wouldn't be per text, but it would be for texting. And they want to do this because they want to see about paying for cell phones for the poor. This has been something since I grew up in San Francisco that many have advocated, that if the poor have access to cell phones, then they'll be able to get jobs, and specifically the homeless in San Francisco. So they don't know how they're going to do it, and they don't know if they can do it, but they're looking at it. And if that could happen nationwide, where different states could collect taxes based on your text messages, can you imagine? I don't know about you guys, but I send about 40,000 texts a day. So we're going to watch that story. So far, it's still just a proposal.
Mommy,
yes?
I said, okay, we can put on the ornament.
We can, but not right now. Can you give me like 2 minutes? Okay, thanks. Okay, the bigger stories I think you should know about. You're seeing a lot of different write-ups about what's going on with the special counsel investigation. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. Just a quick reminder, while everyone's saying that the circle is getting closer on the White House administration and whether or not President Trump is involved in this investigation or the consequences of it at all, while many are talking about that, I just want you to remember that the opposite is also true. Yes, it's a reality that President Trump could, based on what we're seeing with charges with his former attorney, be caught up in some sort of campaign finance violation, potentially. But the opposite is also true, that there are no charges that ever come against the president, no impeachment, and that this investigation produces no impactful results for the administration. That's still an option. I feel the way that everyone's reporting it in the press, it's like already a done deal, that something really bad is gonna happen for the president. And we just don't know if that's the case. We just don't know if that's the case. So just keep those, both are true, both extremes are true. So just keep that in mind. And here's the big story I want to tell you about, because yesterday while I was driving in my car, which is where all my deep thinking takes place, I was thinking about it. You know, everyone's talking about the border wall and talking about politicians arguing about the expense for border wall and border security. And I thought, you know what? At the end of the day, these politicians are asking for the same thing. They're asking for billions of dollars of our money, billions, for border security. So what is the evidence for the best use of our money? Because it doesn't matter if they're Republican, if they're Democrat, they're asking for our money. So like, I want to know, what's the best use of it? Tell me. And guess what I found out? So I started researching the border wall. I started researching border barriers, because it turns out that we already have 700 miles of border fencing right now. And so I thought, okay, great. So we have, that's not quite half of our border, but it's, a significant amount. So what does that show us? Did it really stop people from crossing over? Guess what? One of the big issues for all of this is that there's no good data about whether or not these border barriers worked. And there's no good data, not necessarily for lack of trying. It's because at different points of the border, you have a lot of different variables. You have different foot traffic, you have different vehicle traffic, you have different weather patterns, you have different terrain. You have a fence in certain parts, but then you might have spotlights in other parts, or use of satellite. All these different things that prevent really good data collection and comparison. So when people say, well, a border wall works or a border barrier works, what you should know is that there's really no solid data. There's anecdotal data. So the former acting head of the Department of Homeland Security wrote an article last year and said, listen, in Yuma, Arizona, this border fence has worked. Crime has gone down. Illegal crossings have gone down. This is what we've seen. But there's no data comparing what she said at the time to what was happening in San Diego, where a similar barrier was put up. There's different patterns of people coming across. So I thought that was so fascinating that there's really no great information about whether or not a border barrier, a fence, a vehicle barrier, whatever we've used in the past works. And that actually works in both arguments' favor. So for Republicans, they can say, see, we don't know if a border wall will work because we've only just put fences in. And so we want to put a real wall. And that's why we're going to do it. It's going to work that way. And Democrats who don't want it say, well, look, there's no data, so we don't really know if it works at all. It's about use of our money. And both arguments actually have some support. Both of them could be valid. So I want you guys to know it. One voice I really think is missing from this debate is we don't really talk enough to the Border Patrol agents that are actually on the border all the time. And one of them produced a thesis that I read a majority of last night talking about this lack of data. And he brought up two really good points. He now works as part of the main administration part of border security, so you should know that too. And what he said, it was interesting. He said, the border wall or border barrier is not just about keeping people out. It's about slowing them down so that the agents can catch up with them. So it's not just like we're going to put up this big wall. People aren't going to come over or under it. It's about slowing people down. That was one of his points. And the second thing he said is we really should look at smart technology. Like, is a wall, building a wall, the best investment, or should we use fiber optic cables underneath the ground, sort of like a tripwire, so when people come over or under the border. So those are just some things to think about. I thought it was really interesting. You should know that. As far as usage of your money and the best usage of it, the data still is a little bit out, and not for lack of trying, but for the difficulty of trying to collect data and then compare it. There you go. Okay, I feel better about that. I hope you do too. And I think one of the questions you could ask in a debate at the over dinner is whether or not the data matters. Sometimes it's just about branding, right? Is it about a big, beautiful wall that President Trump wants to put up? Is it about a really tall fence? What sort of message that sends does that matter to? So a couple things for you guys to consider. Anyways, okay, I'm gonna get back to the pancakes. I've also realized that I've done 0 Christmas shopping, and it's December, what day is it? The 13th? What day is it? 13th. So if you guys have any good Christmas ideas for husbands, I really need them because I have no idea.